people's impressions of George Washington tend to be largely silent. He is the face on Mount Rushmore. He is the face on the $1 bill. He is this imposing, commanding, yet often silent avatar of American liberty at its birth. And some of that is historically accurate. He was often quite quiet in meetings, according to historians. But that should not be confused with being particularly awkward with words. He was a very astute public speaker and knew very well how to use language. A lot of that is coming, obviously, as fans of the musical can tell you, from Alexander Hamilton, his right-hand man, let's say, who was probably the better writer in general, but and he did a lot of his speech writing for President Washington and General Washington before that. But the sensibility is very much Washington. I think we can say that. And even if it's not, just going through the documents, it's astounding to see the political skill involved or expressed through these writings. And nowhere, for Washington at least, nowhere is it better expressed than through his monumental farewell address. This is where he announced to the world that after serving 2 uncontested, unchallenged, unanimously acclaimed terms as the first U.S. president, he announced that he would not stand for election for a third term, a third 4-year term. And this sent shockwaves around the world. None other than George III in England supposedly said, if he does that, he will be the greatest man in history. The idea, the audacity of having total power like that, and no one was going to challenge George Washington while he was alive. No one. He had a lot of people griping, but the enormity of his reputation, of his character, of his position in society following the Revolution and in those early years of the Republic was so unchallengeable, so dominant, that he could have just said, yeah, I'll be president again, and it would happen. They would go through the motions of an election, but it would just be his. And theoretically then, that would be the standard. And for the next 150 years, that was the standard. Not quite that, but close to it. Until Franklin Roosevelt came along and said, yeah, all right, World War II is cooking up here. I'm going to stay on. That was a radical move, because everyone until then had stuck to the Washington example. It's not codified in the Constitution. It's not codified anywhere. It was just his precedent, the precedent of 2 consecutive terms. When he announced that, it was a precarious position. It was a precarious moment in American history, and there was great uncertainty. No one really knew how to take this. Everybody kind of assumed that, well, yeah, we got rid of King George. That was good. We didn't like him, but we liked George Washington. So, it makes sense that he's going to be president until he dies, and then we can't have him president anymore. And then we'll figure something out from there. But the idea of the American Republic itself was baked into his character. And the idea of an American Republic without him was almost inconceivable at the time. So when he said, I will not run again, I'm stepping down, enormous emotional uncertainty in the country. At a time when the country was still figuring out what it was, what its character was. Was it anything other than, well, yeah, we're the country that has George Washington at our head. That was fairly predominant in the culture. And so suddenly having to stand on your own 2 feet is very scary. And this speech demonstrates an awareness of that and moves people to where they need to be, to a sense of reassurance, to a sense of responsibility, to the necessary awareness that, well, it's up to us now. We can't rely on President Washington any longer. And the way he goes about this is simply brilliant. The speech starts out with a kind of bland pro forma beginning that just eases into it very, very slowly, but remarkably fast when you get there. The period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States is not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be employed in designing the person who is to be clothed with that important trust. It appears to me proper, especially as if it may conduce to a more distinct impression of the public voice, that I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. Wow. It starts off like he's, addressing a convention of accountants. It is so bland and legalistic, so calm and blah, 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 blah. And then, bam, whammy. That historic sentence, that's all one sentence, that historic declaration that I will decline being considered. It's breathtaking. And he uses this sort of officious and dispassionate tone throughout, where he is trying to create a sense of reasonableness. He's trying to approach this from a very reasonable character. So when declaring something so honestly terrifying to the audience, so shocking, he's trying to bring down the temperature. He's not going off on some grand emotional goodbye. He is trying to tamp down the anxiety. Reasonable language. The third paragraph in, the acceptance of and continuance hitherto in the office to which your suffrages have twice called me have been a uniform sacrifice of inclination to the opinion of duty and to a deference for what appeared to be your desire. Wow, that is really dull. That is really, really overwrought. And it sounds like, again, he sounds like an attorney. This sounds like a legal document. The acceptance of and continuance hitherto in. Now, this is very 18th century. But the effect of this on the audience is to not get excited. He's not stirring up the emotions. He's making this a very ordinary thing. Well, yes, I have decided to retire. Now I'm going to enumerate the reasons for that. He's approaching this as an exercise in law and government and simple public administration, which is effective when you are trying to keep people from panicking. He's on the job, he's doing it, he is marking through what needs to be said and filed legally, but he's not making it a grand dramatic gesture. He does allow, however, that as this is settling in, this news sort of buried underneath the stratifications of officiousness, this move is coming as a little bit of a shock. So he brings the people along to them. He's not going to hide in the officiousness of it. He's going to extend out a identification with his audience. He's not going to leave them just feeling bereft. When he comes down and he injects a little note of common humanity, not unconscious in the outset of the inferiority of my qualifications, experience in my own eyes, perhaps still more in the eyes of other, have strengthened the motives to diffidence of myself, and every day the increasing weight of years admonishes me more and more that the shade of retirement is as necessary to me as it will be welcome. So here he's declaring himself human. He's saying that, you might see me one way, but here I'm saying that I am an old man. He's not that old at this point. He's in his 60s, but, life expectancy, whatever. And in fact, he didn't live too many years longer. He's sensing his own mortality, and he's pointing this out. And he's saying, the shade of retirement is necessary and welcome. It's not just, I want to go down and live the high life on Mount Vernon. It's, I need, I'm wrapping up. My life is coming to a close. I can sense it. My body is feeling tired, perhaps. I need to not be doing this anymore. And you need someone else to be doing this. That sense of humility, that admission that you're not a god, which is antithetical to everything else about we know about monarchs in Europe at this time, establishes a common humanity and raises the audience to that level of shared concern, saying, all right, I'm not panicking because I see my death coming. You shouldn't panic because you see so much uncertainty coming. We're going to get through this together. It is a shared moment of anxiety. Allowing for the emotional significance of the audience grants legitimacy to those feelings and helps bring those people along and accepting. If he just denied that they were allowed to feel anything or that their feelings were unimportant, he would lose them. But he's saying, after trying to calm things down and say, well, this isn't that big of a deal, he is tacitly acknowledging that, well, yes, this is kind of a big deal, and let me explain why. Because I feel my own life coming to a close. That sense of a shared bond with the audience, that sense of a community among them, is critical to lifting those people up, to challenge them into the unknown. And they do this within a legal framework. And he's assuring them that, well, there are guardrails here, but it is up to you to maintain them. When he says, in looking forward to the moment which is intended to terminate the career of my public life, my feelings do not permit me to suspend the deep acknowledgement of the debt of gratitude which I owe to my beloved country and the many honors it has conferred upon me. So here he is subsuming his identity to that of the country itself. The country is superior. The country has bestowed this on him. In other words, the country, the people around him, are bigger than he is. And then a little bit underneath that, he says, okay, he points specifically to the free Constitution, which is the work of your hands. The Constitution itself is the country. The Constitution itself will endure beyond one person. I can leave the stage, the country and the Constitution will remain, and it is up to you in the audience, which is the entire nation. It is up to you to superintend that Constitution, to be responsible for it. It's time for you to grow up and administer the nation on your own without trusting that it will be done for you. And here he gets into a long section where he puts the emphasis always on you, on the citizenry out there. The unity of government, which constitutes you, one people, is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar of the office of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. Emphasizing you. It's all about you. He started off talking about himself, but now he's trying to open it up to bring in the audience so that it's not something happening to them. It's something that they are participating in. They are participating in his retirement and the transition to another administration. And when you allow them to participate as opposed to being passive observers or victims of history, you give them agency, you give them power, you give them a sense of control. And that will tend to dispel some of the panic. People without a sense of control will panic. People who have been given a sense of control, they're more likely to react reasonably. It is him shifting the burden from himself, saying, I'm winding down, I'm tired, shifting the burden onto the other people, and saying that, okay, we're all in this together, now you have to take charge. And he does this in a remarkably unifying way, but unifying with a bit of a goal. The picture he paints is perhaps one that is more an ambition than a reality, because he does go then into a section where he emphasizes the union. These considerations speak of a persuasive language to every reflecting and virtuous mind, and exhibit the continuance of the union as a primary object of patriotic desire. So you see how he's going to them as individuals, and now he is expressing the priority of the union, and specifically the union at this time is a point of some concern, because he was the unifying figure around which everybody rallied. He was the man of Virginia who had the backing, so much of his political backing, while it was nationwide, so to speak, it was also largely lodged in what was becoming the Federalist Party of the North. And his greatest opposition in office had been coming largely from his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and the faction that was creating around him, which was generally a Southern concern and a Southern perspective, which was always trying to tamp down the larger interpretation of the executive office. So he sees the factionalism that is developing in the nation. He understands that as much as he was trying to, throughout, tamp down party sentiments, partisan factions within politics, and as much as he tried to exemplify the idea that we're all in this for the public good, he understands what's coming, and that the regions of the nation were riven with divisions, and he has served as a glue to hold them all together. Everybody can always agree George Washington is our guy, but without him on the stage, what's left? So he's emphasizing the union here as a way to keep North and South and West together. And he itemizes these. He goes through it very specifically, saying, he identifies the North and calls out their specific ambitions in contemplating the causes which may disturb our union. Our union. Notice how he uses the word "our," incorporating everybody, himself along with everybody else, raising them to his level, bringing himself or keeping himself from being elevated out of it or serving as an ideal. It occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographic discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, emphasizing that we're all in this together. He's driving this message because he knows that there are real conflicts in this nation, and regional conflicts are becoming even more acute as he is exiting the scene. Maybe he sees the Civil War coming. I don't know. I kind of doubt he can see that far ahead, but he knows that the essential divisions that were papered over by the Constitution in the early years of the Republic, those central divisions are still there. And history suggests that they will only exacerbate. And of course, they did. So he's trying to address that, to inoculate against it, to calm people down again, to bring them along to a sense of this is fine. And all we have to do is, once we all accept responsibility for our Constitution, for our nation, against the divisions of this and that and the other thing, once we understand that, we can rise to the challenge. Towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however specious the pretext. One method of assault may be to effect, in the forms of the Constitution, alterations which may impair the energy of the system. He's trying to get people to stop from jumping in and meddling with the Constitution too quickly here. He is arguing that the Constitution and the nation built around it needs time to set. It's just come out of the oven, let's say, and you got to set it on the counter for a little while. Dramatic change is dangerous, and he's trying to stall against that. Again, he knows that there are divisions in the country. He's trying to warn against that. He's trying to guide people away from that. He's trying as much as he can to protect people from the fear of change by preventing them from changing too much too fast. He is a man of the Enlightenment. He wants steady, calm, easy transitions. And he's arguing very clearly that you should avoid, whenever possible, in your legal capacity as a citizen, to dramatically change the superstructure or endostructure of this nation. And it's always about shying away from political divisiveness. This is his big, significant message to the nation. He knows that the Federalists are consolidating in the North. The Democratic Republicans are consolidating in the South. We're getting ready for a battle over the presidency. Jefferson has been fairly naked in his ambitions. Adams out of Massachusetts, the vice president at the time, is in place to succeed, to follow Washington, but he is of a very different mindset than Jefferson, and their friendly discussions have gotten much more acrimonious lately. Washington knows all of this, and so he's trying to be constructive and encourage the nation, the people, to rise above that and think in a public-spirited way. And the message that he drives is often quite remarkably significant for our own era. When he warns against the perniciousness of political partisanship. It is important, likewise, that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration to confine themselves within their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding, in the exercise of the powers of one department, to encroach upon another. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the powers of all the departments in one, and thus create, whatever the form of government, a real despotism. I really kind of wish that a lot of people could read this. In our day and age, this is significant. The balance of powers he's arguing for here, and emphasizing as a kind of political hint towards, or he's showing a little leg to, let's say, the Democratic Republicans, who were all about limiting any one sphere from getting too powerful, especially the executive. So after talking about the need for, or the need to resist changing things around too much, which the Democratic Republicans might conceivably want to try and bolster the power of the states and the and individual rights over the government. Now he's saying that, okay, I'm trying to hold you back here, but now I'm going to move over here and try and suggest that, well, yes, we need the balance of powers. We need to have a check. An unchecked executive is a danger, an existential threat to the American character, and he is warning against that. And he makes this then as a kind of moral imperative. He talks about the necessity of morality and human decency itself as a kind of political glue. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim to the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert the great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. He's appealing to something that is civic but not governmental, saying that above all we need to be moral creatures. We need to have basic human decency in our public life or we are lost. And this is an idealism. This is an appeal to the better angels of everyone's nature, to put it as a later fan of Washington would say. This is an effort to remind everyone to be basically decent and celebrate that as a core characteristic of the American character. And that sense of moderation, that sense of morality, is meant to assuage the fears of uncertainty in the immediate future. He's always saying you're going to be okay if you just stick to some core principles, and human decency being one of them, if not the most important. And he turns over to not just how you deal with one another, but how the nation as a whole, you people as a whole, us, we as a whole, deal with other nations. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. And this is probably the most famous part of the speech, where he calls for a nonpartisan foreign policy warning against allying too closely with any European nation against another. Of course, the Democratic Republicans were big fans of the French Revolution and want to ally with the people there. The Federalists of the North are much more aligned naturally with England and the commercial aspects of that partnership and want to align with them. And of course, England and France are on and off at war throughout this entire period. So which side you pick is very significant. And if you pick one or the other side, you will almost inevitably get drawn into that battle. So here is Washington very famously saying, don't do that. Strive for neutrality in foreign affairs, that this is too dangerous. We are too young of a country. We are too weak still. We need time to grow. And so he's trying to tamp down all of that partisan fervor for the glory of the French Revolution, or, you know, our natural bonds with the King of England and all of that. And he's always trying to quell the passions. And so he becomes a great spokesman for enlightenment reasonableness, rejecting emotion. So likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Telling everybody that it is that passionate attachment that is the problem. Judicious, calm attachment, fine. Mutually beneficial with England, mutually beneficial with France, mutually beneficial with everyone, but we will judge them as they come, and we will have to be very unsentimental about them for quite some time. This is the prudent approach that he is always advocating. Let's stay calm and independent. When he makes this appeal constantly for a kind of enlightenment repose of reasonableness. Our detached, talking physically about the new nation being across the ocean from Europe and the comforting distance that buffer provides. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course, as if the physically and psychologically self-contained foreign policy extends to a sense of national character, and we are naturally separate from the tumult of the European conflicts. Always trying to buffer. And as he's getting further and further out, going from, you know, the heart of the American character over to world geopolitics on a grand scale, he doesn't want to lose anyone because nobody really cares about foreign policy. So he gives that advice, couches it in very personal terms, and then brings the speech back to a more personal place. And he brings it back to himself in a way, because now he's going to ease himself off the stage and allow everybody else to join him in easing him off the stage. How far in the discharge of my official duties I have been guided by the principles which have been delineated, the public works and other evidence of my conduct and witness to you and to the world, to myself, the assurance of my own conscience is that I have at least believed myself to be guided by them. Saying that all of these principles that we have talked about reflect on me, my character, and this is why I am doing them, because they are consistent, and consistency is the key. That is what he is always trying to emphasize. And of course, throughout all of this, you cannot help but hear the echoes of the musical Alexander Hamilton. Though when reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. How humble, How human, how qualifying. He's allowing himself and asking everybody else to allow him to exit the stage, to go into retirement. And he is assuring them that this is just and proper and maybe for the best. Saying, I am human, I have flaws, I have made mistakes. The nation is bigger than I am, and it will allow for these mistakes, it will contain them, it will correct them over time. He's creating a sense where allowing himself to be vulnerable, allowing himself to be flawed. He's very conscious of his public image, but allowing that sense of human weakness to seep in, he's allowing everybody else to take control of that and take some pity on him and say, okay, thank you, Mr. President. You have served well. It's time for you to go. We got this. And then at the very end, he keeps the emphasis where he wants it. The lingering thoughts, the last things he's going to say, become the last words of his speech when he emphasizes of our mutual cares, labors, and dangers, which is an oddly warning sign. Cares, labors, dangers. He sees threats on the horizon and he's just warning people against that. But notice the word our. He is once again joining with everyone and saying we're all in this together. This is our problem. This is our threat, our danger, ours. Not me anymore. It's ours. He brings people along and raises them to a position of responsibility and sobriety and some measure of confidence that they can handle it. And yet he does end on that rather foreboding note, which I find fascinating, knowing the ensuing history leading up to the U.S. Civil War. But he's treating them like adults. He's treating them not as children, as his followers. He's treating them as fellow citizens. And from the heights that people had held him in, to join in that mutual pact, it's astounding what this speech does.